After understanding how an index variable of an array is passed as an argument to a method, and also what happens when this index variable is passed as an argument when the method changes its value, now is the time to discuss how to pass an entire array. We will look at this topic from two sides. The first side is how to define an array as an argument into a method, as a formal parameter. And the second side is how to pass an array entirely as an argument as an actual parameter. Let us have a look into an example first, and then we will go into details. Here is an example of a method that has two parameters. The first parameter, as you see, is an array. So how did we know that it is an array? Because the base type has square brackets. And the second parameter is a primitive data type, which is an integer. So this is the method definition. So if you want to pass an entire array as an argument in a method, you simply declare it the same way you declare an array. Now, how to call this method? Imagine you have an array of integer that is initialized with the constants 3, 4, and 5. And now how to pass this array as an actual parameter to the method? Simply you write just the name of the array. So you don't need to specify brackets. You don't need to specify the length of the array. All that you have to do is just simply supply the name of the array. And it should have the same base type as the argument or the formal parameter. If you define an array of type integer as an argument, then you need to pass an array of an integer as an actual parameter. So this is the way to define the method with an argument that has an array. And this is the way to invoke this method if you want to pass an array as an argument. So let us talk in detail about how to define an array as an argument when you define a method. The way you specify an array parameter in a method definition, like this example, is similar to how an array is declared in a program. Here is an example how you are defining this array. You are writing the base type, square brackets, and the name. So similarly for arguments, if you want to define an array as an argument in a method, you do exactly the same. You put the base type, square brackets, and you put the name of the array. And this name will be the name of the argument that will be used inside the method. So any parameter in a method heading should not specify the length. As you notice here, we are not passing the length because the length is already inside the object of the array. Because an array is an object, and if you remember, we have said that it has only one instance variable, which was length. So length will be passed automatically with the array. So you don't need to supply the length as a parameter to the array. One more thing, that when you pass an entire array as an argument to a method, then inside the method, any change to any element of the array, it can change the array itself. So when you pass an array as an actual parameter, and you supply it to a formal parameter, when you changed the array of the formal parameter inside the method, then the actual parameter also will change. And we will see by an example what we mean by this. Now we come to the other side. The first side, how to define an array when you define a method. Now the other side, how to pass the entire array when you call the method. You pass the entire array by just giving the name of the array like what we are doing in this example. You do not use square brackets in the actual parameter. Here is the actual parameter, my array, and here is the formal parameter for the method. So simply don't specify squares, don't specify the length of the array, just simply the name of the array, you specify it as an argument. Let us have a look into an example. In this example, we have only one class, which is called array parameter, and it has two methods in addition to the static main method. So since we are going to call these methods from main, and main is a static, so we have to define them as a static. Notice here we are not writing public because we assume that by default any method that you define in Java, by default it is public. The first method, the name is average, and it has an array as a parameter, and the name of the array is array, and it's of base type integer. So what does this method do? As you see that it computes the average of all elements in this array. So we have a variable sum, and we have a for loop that will iterate over the array elements one by one and will add them into sum. and then the method will retain sum divided by the array length. So notice here we are using the length of the array, although we are not passing the length of the array. But as you see that we are not changing any element of the array inside. We are just reading the values of the elements and we add them to sum. However, in the second method, the name is increment by. The first parameter is an array. The second parameter is an integer. This method increments every element of the array by the amount of the input parameter value. So we have a loop that will iterate over the array, and for every element of the array, the method increments this element by value. So that means that the array elements inside the array will change. And we will see that when we call this method and we supply an array as an input parameter, since we are changing the array inside the method, then the corresponding actual parameter, which is the array in its original place, will also change. So let us see how these methods are called in a program. Here is our main program. It is divided into sections. In the first section, we are asking the user for how many integers. We read the size and we create an array of this size. In the second section, we are reading the array elements from the user and we save them into the array. Now in the third section, as you see, we are calling the method average. And since average method in the formal parameter we have an array, so we have to supply an array. The name of the array that we have declared in our program is A. And if you want to pass it to the method, you just simply write the name of the method. You don't specify any brackets, otherwise you will get syntax error. So here what will be printed on the output screen? The retained value from the method, which is a double value that represents the average of the elements of the array. So this is a type of a method that receives an array and processes the array inside the method. As we've mentioned before, that the average method does not change any element of the array passed as an argument to the method. All what it does simply computes the average of these elements and retain the average as a retain value. Therefore, when we call the method and we supply the array A that is defined in main, because we have called the method in main, and then when we return back from the method, the array A, its elements are unchanged. When the second method is called and we supply the array A as an input parameter, remember that the method changes the elements of the array, any array passed as an argument. It updates every element by adding value to its elements. So therefore, when we call the method increment by and we supply A as an input parameter, when we return back, then we will see that every element of A has been updated by adding 2. So this is why when you print after you come back from the call, you will not see the same values that were entered by the user. Why? Because the method has changed its value. So when you use the actual parameter A, the name A of the array, inside the method, the formal parameter has different name array. However, both of them are pointing to the same array because when you call the method, the reference of A will be copied into array. So when you change the elements of array, in fact, you are changing also the elements of A. Let us have an exercise showing you how to pass an entire array to methods. In this exercise, we are going to use a class called item, and its definition is defined here. So we are going to write a Java program that includes the following methods. Let us have a look first into the definition for the class, identify its data members, the constructor, and the methods. It has 2 data members, which is type as a string and the price as double. There is only one constructor that initializes type and price, the default values for the type none, for a price 0. And there is only one unified set method that sets both data members using one method. And finally, we have 2 getters for each of the data members of the class. Let us see what is required in this exercise. The exercise is asking us to write a main method that declares an array of type item of size 5 and prompt the user to enter the array values. Let's go to JGrasp and show you how to implement this part. We have created a demo class that uses the item class definition. This is now the class definition, and here is our demo class definition. In the first part, we need to declare an array of type item of size 5, and we do this by typing item as an array, and we are going to call the array list, and it's equal to new item, and we are going to create 5 elements. But when we create these elements, we are creating just the references of objects of type item. Now we need to ask the user to give us the data. We create objects from items, and we put the references of these objects to the array. We start by writing a for loop that will iterate over the array elements, and we're going to create an object in each iteration, ask the user to give us the data, and we will save the data into the object. Let us have a look into the item definition. Notice here we have only one constructor, which is the default constructor, and we don't have a constructor that we can supply the type and the price, and it will create an object from these two data members. Therefore, we have to first create an object of item, then we read the data from the user and use the method setItem to change the default values to these values that are entered by the user. So let's go back. So for each item, we will ask for the type and a price. So we will ask the user system.out.print, and we will say please enter type and the price for item, and we'll print the item number. To avoid starting from 0, we will say I plus 1. Then we need to read the type and the price into local variables. We will define a string for the type, and we are going to read it assuming that the type consists of only a single word, and also we will define double for a price, which is equal to read.next double. After we read the data from the user, then we create an object, and we say list I is equal to new item, and we have only one constructor, which is the default constructor, and then we need to change the default values by the values entered by the user by saying list I dot set item, and we supply the type and the price as parameters. The next part of the exercise, it is asked to write a static method named countMobile that takes as parameter an array of type item. The method should count and display the number of items of type mobile. So simply, this is a counting a problem. We go over all items one by one in a for loop, and we check for the type. If it is mobile, we increment the counter. Let us go and implement this method. Now we are back to our main program. So here we are going to define the method. Since we are going to call it from main method, and main is static, so it should be also static public, static. And now we need to decide what is the return value. Here it says that the method should count and display. So it doesn't say that it has to retain the number of items that have type mobile. It says it has to count and display. So therefore, there is nothing to return from this method. And that's why we will define the return value as void. Count mobile. And here we need to define the parameter. It says that takes as a parameter an array of type item. So how to define an array of item? The name of the class item, and this is the way to define it as an array. And we are going to call it item singular item as the name of the input parameter. Now to count those items of type mobile, we need to go over all items one by one. So we write a for loop that will iterate over all items, and we test them one by one. So how to test the type of an item inside the array? We will say f item I and dot. Now how to get the item from the object? If we go back to the class definition, we have a getter for type. So we will call getType to get the type of the item. Get type, and since we are getting a string type, and to compare strings, remember we cannot use equal equal. So therefore we have to use either equals or equals ignore case. Now we don't want to care about case. All spelling is matter. So we say dot equals ignore case, and we will write as a parameter mobile, and now it will compare the type with mobile. Since we are going to count, so we need a counter. So before the loop, we have to create a counter, and we initialize it to 0. And anytime we find an item that has type mobile, we will increase this count by 1. And when we finish from the loop, then we need to display the number of items of type mobile. So system.out.println, and we will say number of mobile items equal, and we will display the value of count after the message. And this completes the implementation of this part. In the last part, we need to write a static method called lowest price that takes again as a parameter an array of type item. The method should display the type of the item with the lowest price. Let's go to JGrasp and implement this method. Similar to the previous method, public static, because it's going to be called from main method, and it will not retain any value because it's going to print the lowest price. The name is lowest price, and it will have an array as an input parameter of type item. So we write item, and we're going to call the array item. We have solved many questions on finding minimum and maximum. We need to keep a track of which item has the minimum price, and we will follow this by using an index. So we will define minimum index, and we will assume that the first item has the minimum price. And then we will iterate over the remaining items starting from 1. And in each iteration, we check the current item price with the price at minimum index. So we say f item at I. Now how to get the price of the current object? If you go to the class definition, we have a getter for a price. So we use get a price. So we will write get a price of the current item and compare it with the item price at minimum index. So we write item minimum index, again get a price to see which one is larger. If it is larger, then we need to change minimum index to the current index, which is I. So here we are tracking the place of the item that has the minimum price. And after we finish from the loop, we simply print system.out.println, and we say that the type of item with lowest price is, because the question says that we have to display the type. After we found the item with the lowest price, we need to display its type. We found its location at minimum index, so simply we get its price by writing item minimum index dot get type, and it will give us the type of the item and displayed on the screen. And this will finishes the implementation of this method. So let us test our program. Let us test these methods specifically. So we will go inside main, and we are going to call the first method after we enter the data from the user, and we are going to call count mobile, and we need to supply as an input an array of items. The name of the array we have defined in main is called list. So we will supply list, and remember that you just give the name of the array as an actual parameter. And also we want to check for lowest price, so lowest price, and also we'll supply list as an input parameter. We save it, and now we compile just to make sure it does not have any errors. So there are no errors, so let us run the program. Now we are running the program. Please enter type and price for item 1. Let's put a colon for separating the message with the data entered by the user. So we will end clear, and we will go here. So we will add colon to separate the message from the data entry. Let us run the program again. So now it is asking for the type and the price for item 1. Let's assume we have mobile, of a price 170, and we have, let's say for type 2 we have iPad with 450, and let's say we have another mobile with 350, and we have a printer of 50 BD, and finally we have a laptop of 400. So now it is a printing that the number of mobile items is equal to 2, and we have 2, and the type of item with the lowest price is iPad 450. In fact, it's found the maximum, so we made a mistake here, and when we go back for testing, we found that there is a problem, and for here we should test for smaller, not greater than, because for minimum it should be less than, not greater than. So let us run it again and test the program again. So for item 1 we have mobile of a price, let's say 170, and we have iPad 450, let's say another mobile 250, let's say we have a printer of 50 BD, and we have laptop of 400. And so as you see that the lowest price is the printer because it is 50 BD. And this completes the implementation of our program.